This is John Allison. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of CEDO, and I'm delighted to have with me a very influential individual in the banking community, a leader in the banking space, Jill Castilla. Jill Castilla is a visionary. I'm going to read this to make sure I get this all accurate. Jill is a visionary leader in community banking known for transforming Citizens Bank of Edmond into a nationally recognized institution. You're president and CEO of Citizens Bank and chairman of Citizens Bank Shares Incorporated. You're the founder of Roger, a digital banking solution designed for military personnel. You have a military service background. You served in the U.S. Army and Oklahoma Army National Guard before entering banking. What a story. And it gets even better. Jill, you're the former leader. You have former leadership in the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City. You bring a deep understanding of financial regulation and economic policy. You turned around Citizens Bank of Edmond. You led the bank from financial struggles to becoming a model of innovation and community banking excellence. And I got a few more. You're a crisis leader. You've led through leadership. Your leadership has been marked through how you've led through crisis. You gained national recognition during the pandemic by partnering with Mark Cuban to help small businesses access Paycheck Protection Program loans. You're an industry influencer. You're a dean and chair of the Southwest Graduate School of Banking at SMU, and you're mentoring the next generation of bankers. And you're recognized as one of America's bankers' most powerful women in banking, and you've been so multiple times. And you're a respected thought leader, frequently speaking on banking innovation, leadership, fintech, and the future of community banking. Jill, what an astounding portfolio of work, and how do you do it all? Welcome to CEDO.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
So, Jill, with that, you are a widely recognized visionary leader in the community banking space. You've transformed, and you can validate or challenge anything that I might not have right in your introduction. You've transformed Citizens Bank of Edmond into a model of innovation and resilience. And before we dive into the strategies, I'd like to take you back a moment when you first stepped into the CEO role, your CEO role. And with that introduction, first thank you and welcome you, but then ask you, as you stepped into that role, give us a sense of what your biggest challenge was when you accepted that position.
Yeah, so our bank had just come out of a turnaround situation. So we were the bottom of the camel's review system. I can't tell you what number that is, but the bankers would know. And I came into the organization whenever it was in that type of condition and led the fastest turnaround in the nation without adding capital. And then I really thought I was going to be leaving the organization. You lose a lot of social equity in the community as a leader because you're making some really tough decisions. And it's also really difficult to go from being a leader in which you're completely revamping an organization and cleaning it up to being one that's transformative. Turning around is different than being transformative. And I didn't know if I would have the capacity and the organizational trust inside to be able to lead something like that. The change that happened was the board, when they asked me to move into this position, they also said that they were committed to being an independent community bank for the next 100 years, like 115 at that time. And so, and they really said, you're the person we want to do it. So, it was like a switch that happened in me where it was like, okay, I'm taking off the turnaround hat and getting to put back on the leadership hat, which is a little bit different than whenever you're kind of black and white making decisions and turnaround. And the biggest challenge was really getting that organizational trust and building the type of culture that wasn't risk adverse to making decisions, where it was very hierarchical, where I was kind of commanding. It was like a battlefield commander, and then transitioning to no, we're going to be collaborative, and this is going to be a safe place to challenge ideas, to challenge me. And that was not the culture that we had previously. And so to build the organization's trust that I truly had changed and to have that consistency of this is what the leadership is going to look like going forward because the situation has changed. I think that was, give me a bank turnaround any day. Culture change, really difficult. So that has been a really, some people on our team came along with me and trusted and elevated and lifted me up and became part of that collaborative culture, and others were a little bit more wary and kind of stepping back. And so it just took a long time before we were able to, as the biggest challenge, that are necessarily read by someone who's done a turnaround that's kind of destroyed some trust, to now one it's like, oh, now trust me. There's very few situations that that's occurred. And so, trying to look for leaders that emulated that I could gain some insight off of, that was really hard. And so it was just a big learning lesson. And probably I should go back and write something for someone else who's in a similar position, because it's very difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're in a particular space in the community that really is built on the premise of trust. The institution, and you said it had been in existence for an excess of 100 years. And what a mandate from the board to say we're positioning ourselves. Most people think in terms of 5-year strategy, but they're articulating a century of commitment to be present in the community. That's a daunting task, and I'm sure that's what gave you pause when you walked into it.
Yeah, it's really lifting up, not having to be, quarter to quarter and how you're surviving, but thinking about how do you survive for multiple generations. And that really requires you to not only think about your bank, but the industry, and how do you lead the way for industry relevancy, not just organizational relevancy.
Absolutely. I'm thinking about, you highlighted on something that I think could be talked about in any vertical, and let me just take this little divergent trail with this, but I heard it once put that it's far easier to birth a baby than to resurrect the dead. So when you're walking into a moment where there's some damaged trust or culture or things that have somewhat died in the process, and then you're tasked with the resurrection, I'm sure the mind of any leader is, I might like to try starting building something from scratch rather than to come in and try to deconstruct to reconstruct. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, and on kind of multiple respects, either kind of starting over in a new organization, or just like it'd be much easier in some ways to get rid of everything from a legacy standpoint. What did save us during the turnaround, though, was this organization had an immense amount of social capital, something you don't see on their balance sheet, but that social capital that they had that they built by doing the right thing consistently year after year for 100 years in this community allowed us to have a lot of community support. So really the breach of trust was really more personal. The organization was able to maintain quite a bit, but it really was like the community viewed me as kind of the villain. And internally, I mean, justifiably so, honestly, trying to do the right thing but not always able to articulate why it was the right thing is a really hard position to be in as a more of a turnaround type of leader.
Absolutely. It's a textbook example of, like I said, it expands beyond the community banking vertical, but really it's a lesson in leadership. That you should document that, because I'm sure there's a lot that could be gleaned from many leaders who are facing these type of challenges. I wanted to position on this subject. You've come in with a community first approach, and forgive me for looking off to the side, but I do want to get this accurate. One of the most remarkable things about your particular leadership, Jill, is how you reconnected the bank with the local communities. I'm going to throw something at you. Tell us about the creation of Heard on Heard and how that became a catalyst for this revitalization, not just for the bank, but for Edmond itself.
Yeah, so Edmond's this amazing community, but our downtown, it's a historic downtown, and it's a low moderate income tract, lots of empty storefronts. Back in like 2013, 2012. And we decided we were going to sell all our branch locations and just focus on our location in downtown Edmond, the same intersection where we've now been for 124 years. But when we looked around, this was not a destination spot. And so we decided that let's make coming to the bank an experience, and that can be, we can do a lot with our lobby, which we have this most kick-ass lobby that you've ever seen. And then we also, but we're like, we got to do something to make this community where you want to come to downtown Edmond, not only to go to the bank, but you want to walk around and shop and grab a bite to eat. And so we did a couple of things during that time. We were able to fuse. We were very inspired by the Bank of Ann Arbor. They do a community event called Sonic Lunch, and they were so wonderful. Whenever I saw Sonic Lunch, the summer concert series, Tim Marshall, the CEO there, engaged me with his team and like, how we can help you? Because I was like, I want to do a concert series, so can you help me? And they just gave us all the information. Just so wonderful. Then we also had the largest food truck event in the nation happen in our downtown Oklahoma City area, and so we got engaged with them. And there's a holiday pop-up that is also really fun in downtown Oklahoma City. So we decided to fuse those three ideas. And then the Americans for the Arts and even Oklahomans for the Arts, nonprofits that support the arts, they do a study that says this is how much, if you go to an arts-related event, how much do you typically spend? And in Oklahoma, we actually spend more than the national average on art. So then you knew kind of like there's a way to even quantify the economic impact of having such an event. So we literally had to beg and guarantee food trucks. We had 5 come to the first Heard on Heard. So this is 3 local bands playing, at that time about 15 pop-up shops and then 5 food trucks. So we had to guarantee a minimum, and they were like, you can't make money in Edmond with food trucks. Edmond people want to eat inside. They sold out within the first hour at Herd on Herd, and so it's a 4-hour event that happens every third Saturday, March through October, and we've been doing it now. It's our 12th season, and we've had finalists from the Voice,
wow,
artists. We've had the winner of America's Got Talent, just really incredible talent here local. Some that have achieved national acclaim and then come back and played for us. And now we typically have about 55,000 people that come to our bank-run.
It's incredible.
The bank is our little 70 people at Citizens Bank of Edmond plan this entire event that happens 8 times a year. And we just had our first one and about to have our second one here in a couple of weeks. So every third Saturday, March to October, 6 to 10 p.m. in downtown Edmond.
And you guys are, in a colloquial sense, you guys are rock stars that you've garnered so much traction with that. On the very first one, tell me about the community equity that was created, just that presence and you kind of overcoming the doubt, the naysayers. How did the community voice their approval of that? Obviously, they turned out, which was they voted with their feet. But beyond that, what did you garner press? Did you catch any national attention as a result of that?
Yeah, so whenever we were going through the turnaround, I would get calls that were concerned less about deposit safety and more about, are we going to lose Citizens Bank of Edmond? And we have 60 banks at that time in our community, and we're just the tiniest one. Like, you didn't think we would really matter, but it mattered much more than just the deposits and loans the banks did. Whenever the greatest affirmations about Herd on Herd are when you come to it and you see the city, whenever they see our team with our t-shirts on, it's inevitable that we'll get multiple. Thank you so much for doing this. This makes me feel like I'm part of the community again. This is so neighborly. We ended up doing virtual concerts during COVID, and even that, just the comments that people were chatting in. And here we are isolated in our bank, putting on this concert for a virtual space with thousands of people attending just virtually, and just seeing how meaningful it was to hear music together. The economic impact has been over $70 million just in that one event. We currently have $200 million in projects happening in downtown Edmond. The storefronts are all full. People are having such a good time here. It's transformed this community. And then when you go to city council and someone talks about why they're coming to downtown Edmond, because they're inevitably asked that by the council members, they always say, I came to Herd on Herd. I mean, without exception, I came to Herd on Herd and I saw the potential. And so there's I don't know how directly it's impacted the bank, because we did, whenever I'm recruiting someone, I was, when we do Herd on Herd, and they're like, oh, yeah, no, I love Herd on Herd. But it attracts a team that is very servant-hearted, which community bankers typically are. We did an opportunity to we don't market any products or services. We just want to make sure that the community, we don't take any other sponsors either, so that everyone knows that Citizens Bank is doing it. But it's primarily the good that you're seeing that's generated, the pride that our staff have with this event. And then how we're creating small businesses. So these small business pop-ups, we created a retail incubator for the shopkeeper experience. So like a storefront where you can try out and you have an incubated experience with our staff, as well as the Independent Shopkeeper Association, kind of guiding new businesses through that process, as well as food trucks have gone on to open restaurants, even some here in downtown Edmond. So it's been a little bit of an incubator or accelerator for small businesses too, which has really fed our priorities to be a small business banker. And so that we have an incredible lead over that position. And she wouldn't be okay as a small business lender at some other bank, but here she's building a small business ecosystem that helps our whole community small businesses be successful. Really well-rounded bankers that work here, as well as the customer that knows that we're going to take care of them. We also operate on the same street an incubator for small businesses called Vault 405, which is a co-working space, and that's in our former bank branch, 20,000 square feet, over 100 businesses using that daily, podcast studio and the works, and that's freely available to all of our small businesses and nonprofits that bank with Citizens.
Everything you're saying to me epitomizes the differentiation between what people think of in terms of a large banking ecosystem versus what is a community banker. What is the community banker doing that differentiates themselves? And one of the things we heard from one of our recent guests who works for a branding agency who really focuses on community banks and credit unions. The question was, what does the local community bank need to be concerned with regarding their brand in the community? And our guest used the word differentiation. And what you're describing is truly what sets you apart from larger entity banks. I'm not trying to throw stones at any bank that's larger than the community profile, but I think it's just it epitomizes the effectiveness and you're investing in a brand. I think you mentioned, can you exactly map to an ROI for all this work that you're doing? But you're seeing the goodwill emerge in the community, and anybody in marketing knows it's always tough to measure ROI. What's the emotional quotient that you're building in your community? And it sounds like it's quite high and a success in that regard.
Well, we've been a deposit first, and how our growth is mandated is just through deposits,
Sure.
Which is a little bit different in this environment. Everybody is saying that, but back in the low interest rate environment, not so much. And so those hard-earned relationships, not just a large loan, but a hard-earned checking account relationship, requires so much social equity that you've invested. And so that's really been our strategy, both on the small business and the consumer size. And we are kind of the antithesis to the differentiation in some ways, because we do not specialize in anything. We're really like the everything. And we really try to think about being kind of the Bedford Falls, the nostalgic, that there's a high degree. I sit in the lobby, for instance. If I turn the camera around, you would see customers in my line of sight, and I'll probably be waving at some of them if they look this way.
Well, bring them on.
There's that. So there's that. Plus, you have to have the technology and the creativity that sees that of the larger institutions. And so I think our biggest challenge is, as Citizens Bank of Edmond and really community banks in general, and extending that even to credit unions, is to educate the public that they're not giving up anything and actually gaining quite a bit if they bank with their local community bank or credit union.
Excellent point. And, just piggybacking on what I said about the discussion we had with the branding agency, one of the things that they educated us to, that you talking about, how people want to take advantage of their community. They indicated that the younger demographics were actually coming back to brick and mortar as opposed to just digital experiences. Are you finding that the case in Edmond as well?
I mean, it takes a lot of work, and I would challenge to really know if that's truly how it works out. I did a survey the weekend before last. It's amazing the digital tools we have where we can challenge, this is my assumption. Is this true? And so I surveyed 1,000 adults 18 and older that have a bank account to see if the digital trust, if you trusted the same, your local community bank, your credit union, as you do a digital bank. Fintech, I assumed, would be much lower, and national banks as well. So trust in national banks and fintechs is quite low, fintechs being the lowest. But there was almost the same level of trust that someone had in a FDIC insured digital bank as they did with a community bank. Credit unions came out a little bit higher than that. So I think we have to be really careful and aware that trust, something that has actually been the differentiator for community banks and credit unions, is something that, and this was especially true in my survey of the younger demographic, that they view them the same, and in some cases view the digital trust, and that demographic specifically, the trust was higher in the digital bank. Then they assume greater security. They assume that the technology is better. And so I think we've got to be really careful and realistic that we've got to be able to stand on our own and be able to compete in the digital space as well as any digital bank can, and then also provide kind of that down-home cooking kind of banking experience.
Excellent point. I'm kind of coined this section we're in as the transformation playbook, and we're talking on the subject of the comparative analysis between the local brick and mortar community bank. What does a neobank or the digital banking world hold in terms of trust? I'm going to talk about banking reinvention, and particularly the digital transformation that you've already touched on. And I'm going to put it in a question to you. So many banks that are struggling with balancing their tradition and innovation. You're a historic bank, and you're tasked with another 100 years. So by definition, you have to have an astute strategy for digital transformation in your community. So you did something that was pretty incredible. You launched, and I'm going to ask you to talk about this, you launched Roger, which is a digital banking solution for military personnel. And I understand that you are a former military, active military, maybe reservist now, I'm not sure. So what was your approach to bringing new solutions to market while staying true to the bank's core values? I think you might have already answered that preceding this, but expound on that if you would.
It's a great question, because I think all the creativity comes from, no matter what industry you're in, and knowing your customer well and being able to anticipate what solutions they need or that they potentially could want without them having the ability to articulate exactly what that is. And so that's really where creativity and innovation comes from. And so what's really important, no matter what type of bank you're leading, is to know yourself, know who do I know well, what communities do I know well. And so when we were provided the opportunity to have a digital bank, the only way that it made sense for us was to serve a community that we know well. It was formerly enlisted Army, my husband's retired Army, daughter's active duty Navy, son's active duty Army.
Wow.
And then 20% of our staff, even though we're not in a military community, have or are currently wearing the uniform. So we know this community well. We also know that there's gaps in service. The new service member coming on, a lot of banks focus on the higher ranking service members and not the new service members. And there's quite disadvantaged when it comes to financial services that are available to them. You still go outside of basic training and base gate and you find payday lenders down the street at Fort Sill, 29 payday lenders in that little small community with 200% interest.
Wow.
And so we know this, so we started Roger, and Roger focused on we designed a bank for the lower level enlisted member with all the great financial management tools, budgeting, and really had a great partner in Nimbus in getting that achieved, paying the highest rates, lowest fees, 4-day early paydays, the works. And we designed it for them, and then now, since we designed for a really specific customer, it's really now become much more endeared in the entire military community. And so now we're sitting at 3,000 accounts, $40 million in deposits, and after a year, which far exceeds any expectations on building a brick and mortar branch. And we've done it with almost zero marketing. So it's, really, if you can do it true to who you are, it becomes very viable. If you just kind of are like, well, this is what some consultant told us to do, and because the market gives it, if you don't know that community well, it'll be really difficult to earn the trust and be able to decipher the noise. There's just so much noise out there with all the digital banks that have been launched.
Sure. You're putting me in mind of a book that I have fallen in love with, and this is going to sound ironic to phrase that way. It was authored by one of the co-inventors or developers of the Waze app, and he penned a book called Fall in Love with the Problem, Not the Solution. And what I'm hearing you say is you really understood a pain point in the community. And I can't imagine, it's so predatory to think that some people fall prey to 200% interest scenario. It's almost criminal, it feels like, and I don't know how. Yeah, it should be. Don't even get me going on what the credit card interest rate climate right now and how insane it is. I think also I read somewhere that isn't military protected under something like they're capped at 18% on their credit card rates or something
but it's really limited on what type of loan products fall underneath that, and then also some fees are excluded, and so it's car loans can fall underneath there, home equity loans, unsecured loans to some degree don't, except there are some Service Member Relief Act requirements, but it's not as clear as what you think it would be. I thought that all loans kind of fell underneath that. And it's just not true. And so, and we're not doing any lending. All we're doing is a deposit. We're thinking we can get someone early. We can help them have really good savings habits, and perhaps they'll have the emergency savings where they don't have to go get a $1,000 loan at 200% interest.
Yeah, that's incredible. And that comes, again, with a thorough knowledge of, what are the pain points, what the demographic that you're actually speaking to in that moment, and what Roger has accomplished. So you didn't do something to be novel. In my mind, it tells me you thoroughly understood the issue, and you brought a solution to that.
Yeah, we really resisted for a while. We had great friends in the fintech community that offered this to us, and we tried it a bit, and then we're like, this is just too much of a lift for 70 people in one location to do. And then it came back to us with an easier solution, and then it kind of fermented in our mind that this idea is really a good idea. It's not we really care about making an impact. And so not only being sustainable, a good friend of mine, he has a formula that's like rigor plus relevance equals impact. And I think that's true. And then you throw into where you're uniquely positioned to be able to help, the impact then it's like a multiplier to that equation. And so, that's really what's exciting to us. It's motivating for a team. We went through COVID and had some really unique experiences there that really fused what our mission orientation was, and that we kind of follow us, and this recognition like no one else is coming. So if no one's done it yet, they're not going to do it. So why not us do it?
Why not?
And so it's really a part of our culture too, and that we are like, wow, really called to action, and then the team gets on board and is able to execute something like Roger really well.
Well, you set me up for my final question in this container of the transformation playbook. So we talked about your community first approach. We talked about your banking reinvention and your digital transformation. You mentioned COVID. So in the midst of crisis, you emerged as a leader, and you were leading through the pandemic. During the pandemic, you apparently made headlines, and I didn't see the headlines natively, but I've learned about it. You made headlines by partnering with a gentleman named Mark. Did I get that name right? Or Cuban? I'm just messing up all the day here. I want you to tell us a little about him, but Mark Cuban helped you with small business access funding, and that's not something you see every day in banking. How did that collaboration come about, and what can banking leaders learn about being bold in moments of crisis? Certainly not seeing our last crisis in America. I mean, I don't mean to sound morose, but it's just a fact of life. Things occur.
Yeah, so I've been engaged on Twitter primarily for the last 15 years. When we moved from a written agreement that day, I joined Twitter. And, that's a great way to build community. It can be, harmful in lots of ways too. And so I really was engaged with the fintech community. And my phone started blowing up during COVID that Mark Cuban had tweeted out. Mark Cuban of kind of Shark Tank fame, owned the Dallas Mavericks.
Right.
And he said he wanted to partner with the FDIC Insured Bank to get stimulus checks to Americans faster. So the Treasury had said it was going to take them a couple weeks to get checks out. And so he was like, we need to figure out a solution. I ended up pitching to him with a solution. We challenged the rest of banks and credit unions in America to follow us, and we shared that plan with others. Fast forward into PPP happens. I'm out online as well as with Mark, helping small businesses. He's sending me people to help, and I was matchmaking with community bankers across the nation because a lot of these urban centers with high concentrations of small business owners did not have community bankers in their area, and these large institutions prioritize those with current relationships, and so they were set aside. So we were matchmaking them really fast. And then the PPP application came out. So a lot of fintechs jumped in to fill the void, and then they popped smoke and left whenever forgiveness came. And the forgiveness application, I think, was 12 pages long. It was super complicated. And so Mark sent me an email, just said, can you grab some students and build a website to help me guide this application? And so I was able to pull my friends from Teslar, who are amazing, and get with them and design, implement, and deploy within 10 days a guided PPP forgiveness application, not for our customers, but for the world.
Wow.
And so that they could then download a PDF at the end to be able to provide the bank that purchased their PPP loan from the fintech. And so that was 250,000 businesses that accessed that site in the first week. The FTLD registry with a .bank URL, they came to our rescue in just a few days. We were able to get that deployed for us. Cuban gave me his AWS password so that we could handle all the volume. I mean, and I think where it goes, and Mark, for one, I've gotten a lot of criticism over the year being accessible. I put my cell phone out there. I'm out there on Twitter. But Mark Cuban, there's like no one more accessible to him. What he does is he focuses on one area, and then when he's done with that area, he shuts the door and moves into another. I never worked with an assistant. I never worked with a PR. I worked directly with him.
Wow.
It's pretty amazing, but to me that reinforced like being accessible and being transparent yields trust. And again, we go back to the trust word, and there's nothing like in the crisis of having a leader that's willing to engage with you, be accessible, answer questions, and then be able to be accessible for 24/7 type of experience. One Saturday I had 1,000 messages in my DM.
Oh my.
on Twitter. And so it really taught me a lot. It was a big pace for our team because we were also trying to serve our customers at the same time. So I think it's just stepping up. Listening matters, and even responding when you don't know, but having this drive to action, bringing in like-minded people. A lot of people wanted money to partner with me, or they wanted Mark Cuban to endorse them. And Teslar did it just out of the kindness of their heart and did it at no cost. And then they had such benefits that resulted from that financially. We have a motto here that if you do good, you'll do well. And so do the right thing first. So one of our mottos during that time was do the next right thing, because whenever you're in a crisis, there's so many right actions, it's overwhelming, and there's so much chaos happening, and just to try to do that next right thing that's from Frozen 2. So the great wisdom of Disney.
Well, I have to ask this question. We're talking about crisis. We're talking about you stepping into something that had an amazing amount of potential challenges and pitfalls. I don't have this on my notes, but I'm just curious. Given your background in the military, did you feel that your military training helped you in these moments deal with these kind of insurmountable odds?
I think it's kind of buildable. I was a very low-ranking person in the military, but that builds discipline. And then to be at the Federal Reserve in a high-paced environment, I was in the check automation area when we deployed Check 21 and be able to optimize that nationally. And so then the pace of that, I think, helped. So you have the ethics and then kind of the pace of decision making, and that you just make the best decision you can. But an indecision is a decision, and it's not usually a good one. To community banking and the turnaround, where you see again the cost of not making decisions, that you have to be decisive, or the cost, they don't get easier if you wait. I think all of that helps so much. And then to care, like the care component, I think the services teach you that, the Fed taught me that, and community bank teach that you care for your fellow human, and we can see so much pain. And so knowing that you've got the tools that could potentially help someone, we call it internally a little bit, there is maybe a little bit of mental illness, like an altruistic narcissism that also takes some place, like no one else is coming, I've got to do something, let me put all these people on my back. So I think that there's something like that that's kind of ingrained, and I work with a lot of, my team is amazing, like the people I get to work with every day that have this sense of commitment to our community, that wanted to always do the right thing, that are so incredibly smart, and also want to keep elevating and having high expectations what I can be as a leader, as well as where the community bank can go. That's everything as far as being part of this job in this bank.
I'm going to deviate for the last time, and then we've only got a few minutes. I'm going to take you quickly through some questions. But you remind me, and you referenced this earlier, Bedford Falls, my favorite movie, It's a Wonderful Life. What a banking metaphor for community banking. And you strike me as the Jill Bailey of Edmond.
I'll take that all day.
And I don't know if you have a Potter in your local community, but just if you're listening and by some stretch of the imagination you haven't seen It's a Wonderful Life, don't wait for Christmas. Go watch this movie, because it is full of so many analogies that you can bring into modern times of you use the word altruistic, but somebody who feels the conflict, feels the commitment, know they have to do something, maybe aspires to do something grand. I think George Bailey wanted to be a bridge builder or something, but he was arrested by the need of his community and the heart of his father. And subsequent to that, although it's an allegory or whatever we want to say, it's fictitious. Man, I see what you guys are doing in your community, and you taking on that burden to really have impact. And I just wish you guys 100 years of success, and maybe you'll still be in your position in 100 years, which would be incredibly noteworthy as well.
Yeah, I doubt that, but I think something to keep in mind is that we just don't come by being George Bailey by being a community bank. Potter's Bank could also be identified as a community bank by his size. And so it's not based upon size, it is that altruism and our care for our community that makes that differentiation between being a George Bailey and being a Potter. I wish I had more time to talk with you, Jill. Maybe you could come back for a second time and we can pick up on this. But, some time ago I had an occasion to visit with a banking institution outside of our state, and I sat across
from a chief lending officer, and he said something that it was amazing, and I'm sure it would send a cold chill down some's back. He said, he looked right at me, he says, I don't care about a person's credit score. I want to know their story because bad things happen to good people. So he was saying, I'm willing to look past the algorithm, a FICO score, a gradation, and look inside the story and make a decision based on broader facts. And man, I think if there's anything that we've all faced in America is the lack of connection, the lack of ability to get in front of someone who's a decision maker to present an intelligent case when there are extenuating circumstances to be looked at. You spoke earlier about making yourself available, Mark Cuban making himself available, not having to be surrounded by gates that prevent people from talking to them, but it's just an incredible thing to contemplate.
Well, a lot of times it's the pathway to yes, so it's not always, it may not be a not right now, and learning the story helps you identify like what's keeping you from that dream. And so I've had several customers where it's been a 3, 4, 5-year journey to get them where they want to be, because maybe they had bankruptcies in the past, multiple bankruptcies, maybe there's a lot of cultural challenges that some communities face based upon kind of credit management early on that can really stifle their ability to take advantage of economic opportunities going forward. And so I just work with a lot of people, and what we look for at our bank are individuals that will treat the same the person coming in with a $15,000 request or a negative balance in their checking account the same as the guy bringing in $50 million. And that is a rare quality. So, but that's where you treat everybody as humans, and you see the kindness and the seeking of growth, and want to be part of that with everybody in your community, not just those that are financially the most beneficial or the easy yeses.
Brilliant. I want to just try to drive this home with a section on leadership and industry insights. I'm going to have to truncate my questions because I've gotten you off on a few rabbit trails. I wish I had more time with you. Again, I just want to respect your time. So, from your perspective, what's the biggest obstacle preventing community banks from thriving today? I was just having a conversation earlier today. We're in a climate or an environment where mergers and acquisitions are happening. We could make an argument that the community banking and credit unions, just on a bottom line numbers, are shrinking in terms of through mergers and acquisitions. What is the What is that big challenge that's preventing the banks from thriving and having to maybe abandon their 100-year legacy and give way to something that they never had forecasted?
I mean, there are really practical answers to that. We've had succession planning issues come to mind most, the talent piece. We've invested a lot in our infrastructure, and that's also very expensive when you look at IT and leveling up all your products and services can be quite overwhelming. We have long agreements that typically we have to sign in banking, and that keeps you from being very nimble. But I do think we keep kind of fighting the same fights that we did 10 years ago. We don't have the same challenges that we had 10 years ago. Credit unions, in my opinion, are not our enemy, for instance. Like, we spend a lot of energy directing, that's like our enemy. That is not. Irrelevancy is our enemy. And there needs to be this sense of urgency and more collaboration where credit unions really do kick the booties of community banks is they collaborate. They have servicing centers together. They're much more collaborative in how they work together than we are. And we need to do that better. A lot of these succession planning issues, if we were able to share some of our support functions kind of more as a group, but we're unwilling to do that. You may see one-offs here and there, but it's very, very rare. We've got to get more collaborative. We have a sense of urgency. Just because you're not feeling the threat right now does not mean that you're not going to be, it's going to hit quickly, that we're going to be potentially irrelevant and not be able to keep up, especially as you see fintech acquisitions of bank charters. That difference from a fintech going to a digital bank, that just makes their trust go through the roof and then makes them on equal playing fields with us. And so we've got to be dynamic in our thinking, collaborative, and we can get through this together.
Excellent point. I have one more question and we'll close with it. And before I let you go, I'm going to redo the intro because I wanted to get that right. And Aisha can come in and edit it and clean it up. Through the magic of television, we'll fix that. So before I let you go, I'm going to read your intro again. So coming back to the leadership piece of this, Advice for the next generation of banking leaders. So what's the one leadership, it might be tough for you to distill it down to one, what's your one leadership lesson you wish you had learned early in your career? And what advice would you give the next wave of banking leaders in this moment?
Yeah, and I would, this may be just because of the time that you're asking me this, honestly, but I think developing resiliency as an individual so that you don't let your emotions be on the outside as far as whenever you're developing yourself. You have to do hard things. You have to seek and get hard, direct feedback so that you can grow. I was so blessed that I had that early on through really rigorous military and the Federal Reserve, where you had leaders who gave you candor and directness with kindness, and to seek that out, because if you miss that early on, you will have a deficit going forward. So you want to make sure you build that really strong foundation, that you appreciate direct feedback and that you do the hard work. If something is difficult and it's hard to learn, that you power through it, because you can persevere through that. You can persevere through so much in life, but also in a career.
I mean, I wish that you could somehow speak more broadly and challenge the industry to develop models of leadership mentoring. Is there anything occurring on that front within the banking community where there are programs that are designed to really, to your point, teach aspects of resilience and other leadership qualities, not just the technical pieces?
Yeah, I mean, we do a good job in our graduate schools of banking, but you're catching more at a senior level then, and so it may be a little late to be able to really get, where if you have fragility at that level of the organization, your ego can kind of make you resistant to getting feedback and changing. So we do need to do something a little bit earlier than that. I know the associations have tried to develop more young leader type of get-togethers and especially different functions of the bank that may reach lower level leaders, but we can't just make it cheerleading time. We've got to be able to get to the hard stuff and encourage them to have more resilient leadership, because that whenever there's change or chaos or crisis, that's where that resiliency shows up, that you can be a calm, cool, and collected leader and then help everyone kind of go through and make progress and survive through difficult times.
Yeah, excellent point. Jill, thank you for your time and your insight. And again, I think you are a wealth of experience, of innovation, and you've risen to the challenge in ways that probably no one could have forecast. Well, you've accomplished so much, so I want to ask you, what's next on the horizon for Citizens Bank of Edmond? What is there anything you could reveal, anything you're working on, or one thing that's exciting you as you look forward?
Yeah, we're really excited with Roger. We're launching business banking, so that will really become a full-fledged bank for veterans and service members. So that's really exciting. I think with other things, we have legislation happening with digital currency that's going to really change how deposits look. And so considering how do you ingest a stable coin type of environment into the banking environment, you can't just cover your ears and hope it goes away. It's going to change fundamentally what our balance sheets look like. And so that's another area where we're seeking a lot of understanding so that we can be prepared in a changing environment.
Well, Jill, we are thoroughly taken with your impact and all that you're doing, and we wish you those 100 years of success ahead, and maybe you'll be there for at least half of those 100 years. I don't know how much longer you're going to be in place, but I feel you're going to be there for a long time, and your community is fortunate to have you. Your board, your bank is fortunate to have you, and we're cheering you on from Atlanta, Georgia. And thank you so much, Jill.
Well, come visit us. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
We will.